I'm wondering, in relation to a child's bicultural or bilingual identity, how learning stories can help the child to develop those aspects of their life.
Well, New Zealand has had a very interesting journey. We were very fortunate the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the Crown and Māori, and there have been very many complications because of the notion of the translation of that document. The Māori translation is understood version and the English, and sad to say it didn't happen immediately, and it's taken some time, but New Zealand is well and truly on a path towards dealing with the issues of a bicultural nation. And I think that in the process, early childhood education has made a very big commitment to being responsive to bicultural education. Within New Zealand, obviously, we have a very, very strong kohanga reo movement, which is the immersion Māori movement, but we are still, the language is still very much under threat, although it's clearly, strengthening as we grow and develop. And the teacher in the early childhood setting has a responsibility to all children in terms of bicultural values. So valuing things Māori, not just for Māori, but for all. Because the majority of Māori children, for instance, are mainstreamed across all of the services. So it's very important that there is responsibility on the part of every teacher to increase their use of te reo Māori, and also to think about Māori values. And I think that the learning stories provide, one, an opportunity for the teacher to make visible that value. So there can be no doubt in the parent's mind that I value your place, I value your ancestry, I value your history and your contribution to this world that we now live in. And Te Whāriki speaks it, actually. It speaks the bicultural curriculum. And there is, deeply embedded in Te Whāriki is mana, the empowerment of the child. And we have, as we grow and learn and understand, for instance, like many Indigenous cultures have been much maligned by colonisation, and people would say, in terms of the current, some of the outcomes of violence, if we go back before colonisation and we listen to the voices of the church, particularly when they entered as missionaries New Zealand, there are many writings now that show that the Victorian religious people were aghast at the sensitivity and joyfulness and engagement of parents with their children, and their valuing of children and children's lives, and their respect of children and children's lives. So understanding that history is important. For Pākehā or non-Māori teachers, it's important to read, to understand, not expect Māori to tell us, not expect Māori to come up and start teaching us, but for us to go on this journey, this bicultural journey, and to be exposed and to explore and to understand more deeply. And as teachers are able to do that, they begin to write very sensitive stories. And there have been some beautiful examples, actually, of teachers who have made it very clear through their documentation, their valuing of things Māori. And by putting this in the child's documentation, it presents an opportunity for revisiting. You can say something like this to a child and their family, but once you write it down, it's so much more powerful, because it can be read and reread and reread. And of course, this impacts on the identity of the child, how you see the child. And that's why, we're lucky that all that old documentation was hidden, because actually you wouldn't want that to be forming the identity of the child. Whereas if you write something powerful about the child and their identity, then things change. The other thing that's happened out of out of Te Whatu Pōkeka, we did have one booklet, one of the 20 books was on bicultural development, which tells something of the journey of teachers on this journey, and gives, if you read some of those stories, you get a sense of the journey that teachers are on. And following that, a Māori group formed, which to continue the journey of what might bicultural assessment, Māori assessment look like actually. And Te Whatu Pōkeka was the new development. And this has some fabulous documentation inside as well. But Te Whatu Pōkeka is also another beautiful metaphor from Māori. The metaphor of the baby wrapped in a woven, fine woven flax, encased in the middle of albatross feathers that grew with the child, just as the curriculum will be formed by the child and grow with the child. So all of these metaphors have been very important in helping teachers to connect. And inside Te Whatu Pōkeka are some interesting frames, again, possibilities for teachers to use to deepen their understanding of what it means to be, or what Māori views might look like, ways of knowing, ways of being, like another frame to consider.
Before I share the learning story, I want to first and foremost acknowledge the work of Leslie Ramaka and the wider team who worked on and participated in this project. Te Whatu Pōkeka, Kaupapa Māori Assessment for Learning Early Childhood Exemplars. The full document is available online. The writers of the project stated, "We have named this project Te Whatu Pōkeka. A Whatu Pōkeka is a baby blanket made of muka fibre from the harakeke, that is the flax plant. Carefully woven into the inside of the blanket are albatross feathers to provide warmth, comfort, security and refuge from the elements. The pōkeka takes the shape of the child as it learns and grows. It is a metaphor for this entire project, the development of a curriculum that is determined and shaped by the child." The photograph on the slide of Ana Rupene Whektuki, also known as Hini Hirini of Ngāti Maru Iwi, was taken at the Foy Brothers studio in Thames in the 1870s. Pākehā teachers in New Zealand need to be very mindful of Jenny Ritchie when she states, "We cannot be expert in another person's culture if they do not share the cultural background, and non-Māori cannot speak for Māori." Leslie Ramaka goes on to state, "Although it may not be possible to see through the eyes or from the heart of another, it is possible to develop understandings about people's ways of knowing and being." Leslie then goes on to talk about the development of kaupapa Māori assessment understandings and practices. Requires time, passion, ongoing commitment and drive, support, and recognition of the realities of life for individuals and the early childhood service. It's not a simple short-term fix. Teachers in kaiako and mainstream are keen to develop their knowledge of Te Ao Māori. In fact, they are required and guided to do so through teachers' registration criteria, as well as implementing the early childhood curriculum Te Whāriki. As in this quote from Rita Walker in her paper The Philosophy of Te Whatu Pōkeka states, "Observe me as a child of my own indigenous culture. Provide me with an environment that accepts, values and sustains my individuality so that I can truly feel safe as well as nurtured. Allow me to explore and interact with this environment so that I may reach my full potential." As Rita goes on to say, adults working with children must establish meaningful and intimate relationships, encouraging and supporting them in a way that is unrushed, peaceful and tranquil, by interacting in a manner that motivates and ignites a passion for learning. I do believe that all New Zealand kaiako have a responsibility to enact our bicultural curriculum. There is no English curriculum, only a bicultural curriculum. Te Whāriki and an Indigenous immersion curriculum for Te Reo. Every New Zealand teacher in kaiako needs to get engaged in kaupapa Māori assessment understandings and practices. And as Leslie says, this requires time, passion, ongoing commitment and drive, support, and recognition of the realities of life for individuals in the early childhood service. It is not simple or short-term, but it is a very important, worthwhile journey for us all. I am now going to share an example of a learning story. Karen Goldsworthy is the author of this learning story, and at the time of writing this story, taught at the Lintot Community Childcare Centre, which was originally part of the Hamilton Childcare Services Trust in Hamilton, New Zealand. This learning story is published in our book, Learning Stories in Practice, by Margaret Carr and myself, and is part of the chapter focused on developing partnerships with families. This is what the learning story looks like in the portfolio. The learning story takes 3 pages in the child's portfolio. Included is a lovely response from the whānau, that is, the child's family. The photos tell the story. For the purposes of this discussion, I have separated the photos and text over the next few slides so we can explore the story in closer detail. This learning story is entitled Your Special Taonga. Taonga in Māori means treasure. Tyson, a few weeks ago, I clearly remember you vibrantly sharing with me your really special taonga, your greenstone necklace. And over the last 4 weeks, I have had a student called Tukimihia here with us, learning to be a teacher, and when she left, she gave me a really special taonga, just like yours. Today, I brought my pounamu in to show you, so we could share in meaningful discussions about our gifts. You carefully opened the box to my necklace and said, "Can I put it on?" "Yes, you can," I replied. "Your one is not the same as my one. My one is this shape, and your one is this shape, but it matches mine." You then continued to say, "My one came from Nanny and Pop, found it from the greenstone, and they picked it up and they gave it to me. And they put lots of lollies in it, and I eat them in my tummy." And in the story, Karen writes, "Nanny and Pop, I would love to hear more about the story of how you found or picked Tyson's pounamu." As we sat together, you were analysing each of the pounamu, and I asked you, "What does your greenstone mean, I wonder, Tyson?" You replied, "It means that it is special and that I am special." Together we delved into meaningful research as we searched online for images of greenstone carvings, and you said, "I can paint that." You sat patiently at the art easel, moving the brush to the rhythm of your ideas. You began with the circle shapes. "This is a koru," you tell me. Then comes the orange line. "The stick, this is a koru lollipop." You then painted the blue lines. "This is a koru lollipop with an amazing sun." What really makes this story special to me, Tyson, was in the afternoon your Nanny and Pop arrived with your mum to collect you. You were so excited to see them, and you took Pop to show him your picture, which was on the wall. Karen ends this particular learning story with what we call a Wakatoki, and Te Whāriki Online describes Wakatoki in this way. Wakatoki are used in a range of contexts in Māori, such as whai kōrero to support the speaker in making a point, a statement, aligning the present with the wisdom of Te Puna Tupuna. Wakatoki are metaphors that support critical thinking by allowing the receiver of the Wakatoki to consider another way of thinking from a worldview other than their own. To affirm Wakatoki is to accept the indigeneity of a Māori iwi lens and invites the receiver to align their thought process to this. This is biculturalism in its truest sense, as one worldview interacts with another on the same level. Each tiriti partner, that is, the partner in New Zealand, Māori and Pākehā, has equal status. Their individual mana remains intact and intertwines to co-construct a collective understanding. Wakatoki can be used to provoke kaiako, that is, teachers, to adopt a cultural lens that, like Te Whāriki, is open and reciprocal to learning and teaching. Here we look at Wakatoki and Te Whāriki as statements of practice, how we can reflect and implement these into our learning spaces. Karen has chosen this particular Wakatoki. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi engari he toa takitini. Its translation is, I come not with my own strengths, but bring with me gifts, talents and strengths of my family, tribe and ancestors. So Te Whāriki explains, in Māori tradition, children are seen to be inherently competent, capable and rich, complete and gifted no matter what their age or ability. Descended from the lines that stretch back to the beginning of time, they are important living links between past, present and future, and a reflection of their ancestors. These ideas are fundamental to how Māori understand learning and teaching. We are now entering the second part of this particular learning story. That is, the focus on analysing the learning. What does this all mean for Tyson? And Karen starts with a little preamble about her professional learning that she's been engaged with. Tyson, over the last week, I have attended professional development teaching me about the principles of Te Whatu Pōkeka, which is a Māori assessment exemplars publication, and what it means to be a Māori learner. I have been reflective upon what I have learnt, Tyson, thinking about how I can apply this to the story. So she starts with Nā honana ki te tau parapara, ways of knowing, mōhiotanga. Tyson, you have a strong understanding of the importance and value your necklace holds as you proudly wear it every day. You told me your grandparents gave it to you because it is special and I am special. You are, Tyson. You are a unique person with your own mana, mauri and wairua, inherited through our ancestors. Therefore, your very being is treasured. And this is something written about inside the publication Te Whatu Pōkeka. On finishing this last page, I realised there were 3 words in that analysis that would need translation for those of you who do not come from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Those 3 words are mana, mauri and wairua. They are written about in a publication from the Education Review Office for ECE, and the writing is informed by both Rita Walker and Hirini Moko-Mead. And this is what they have to say about these qualities. The well-being and learning of Māori children is located in their culture, language and identity. A child's culture, language and identity are places where concepts of mana, wairua and mauri exist. Mana is the power and potential the Māori child brings with them. Wairua is a concept linked to the child's spirit and emotional stability. Mauri is observable. It is the life force and energy of the child which enables energy to be expended, the mind to think and have some control over how the body behaves. It enables the child to be vibrant, expressive, and impressive. Ngā āhuatanga o te tamaiti, ways of being, he Māori tangata. Māori is the observable. It is the life force and energy of the child which enables energy to be expended, the mind to think and have some control over how the body behaves. It enables the child to be vibrant, expressive, and impressive. When I reflect upon this saying, Tyson, I am taken back to the moment of your painting, and I know your Māori or life force is healthy. You painted such a thoughtful painting, expressive of our conversation and vibrant in detail. You confidently articulated what this painting represented, and you actively participated in your own learning and understanding. We now come to the final part of the analysis, and this section is headed Tikanga Whakaaro, Ways of Doing. She quotes from Te Whatu Pōkeka. Learning and teaching within the Māori context is based on whanaungatanga and tikanga Māori. The Māori word ako means both learning and teaching. Now, just to clarify those two words, which will be new to some of you, whanaungatanga is about a relationship, kinship, a sense of family connection, a relationship through shared experiences and working together, which provides people with a sense of belonging. And tikanga, the other word used here, generally speaking, tikanga are Māori customary practices or behaviours. The concept is derived from the Māori word tika, which means right or correct. So in Māori terms, to act in accordance with tikanga is to behave in a way that is culturally proper or appropriate. Now, in this section, actually, Karen goes on to give some reflection. She says, Tyson, over time and through meaningful interactions and play, we have come to build a reciprocal, trusting relationship. As a teacher, I am not the expert. Rather, we are learning beside each other as we share ideas, construct knowledge, and explore our understandings of the world around us in meaningful ways. Sharing our taonga was special to me, Tyson, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to further strengthen our connection. The final section in this learning story is a response from the whānau, or family, the whānau voice, and Dean Te Tai is Tyson's granddad, his moko, as he would be called in Māori. He replies saying, "What a thoughtful account, Karen. Thanks for sharing it with us. The easiest way to explain how Tyson's pounamu came to be is to simply say it chose him. We searched far and wide and examined dozens, possibly hundreds of stones, looking for that special something, initially without much success. We finally stopped in a little place in Kawakawa, and as we looked through their selection of stones, Nanny said, 'Here he is,' and held up the taonga. There was no need for examination or consultation, as we knew it had finally found its way home." The grandfather's voice continues. "Look into the taonga and you will see Tyson there. The shape signifies Tyson's creativity, passion and energy. The marble colouring holds proud his blended Māori, European and Niuean heritage. His strength and courage, his compassion and empathy are the rigidity and texture of the pounamu. The taonga is special because our moko, our grandson, makes it so." And finally, the voice of Frida Te Tai. "I think Tyson has pretty much summed it up. A special gift for a very special boy. I think it's more about Tyson and not so much about the pounamu. I really had no idea it would, and does mean so much to him. He wears it with such pride, and I am so proud of him." I wanted to restate Karen's reflection because it says so much about her as a teacher, her humble response, really, to this experience of growing her understanding of what it is to be Māori. She says, Tyson, over time and through meaningful interactions and play, we have come to build a reciprocal, trusting relationship. As a teacher, I am not the expert. Rather, we are learning beside each other as we share ideas, construct knowledge, and explore our understanding of the world around us in meaningful ways. Sharing our taonga was special to me, Tyson, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to further strengthen our connection. Karen Goldsworthy. I wanted to end this conversation with some of the reflective questions that we developed during a project called Te Whatu Pōkeka, Assessment for Learning Early Childhood Exemplars. And these particular reflective questions come out of the section of the Bicultural Assessment booklet. Now, so I'm just going to run through them, and you can just ponder these possibilities within your own cultural context. What is the vision for wise bicultural assessment practice in our setting? How far are we along the pathway toward it? What evidence do we have that we are moving towards it? How do our assessment practices reflect the bicultural nature of te whāriki, a question especially for New Zealand? What steps can we take to make this bicultural nature more visible in our assessment practices? Are our assessment practices accessible to Māori whānau? Do they access them? Do they have a say? If not, why not? How can we encourage dialogue on and contribution to assessment? What examples of bicultural assessment practices do we have to share, and what questions do they raise? And how is the whanaungatanga approach reflected in our assessment practices in our early childhood setting? These, I'm sure you could develop a lot more reflective questions that are relevant to your own cultural context, but hopefully that is a useful starting point. I am looking forward to our next conversation, which will ask the question, what do you say to teachers who might think that they don't have time to write learning stories? I hope you found this a useful webinar and conversation to start or to continue your conversations around bicultural practice. Thank you.